By the time I got my 4th DC Multiverse figure, there was a period in between months since I picked up my 3rd figure. And the reason for this is because at this point in time, I wasn't interested in buying any other figures that were available. And of course, I would come to regret this decision later on in the future with some of those figures that I wish I got during year 1. Now, I was very lucky to get this figure because I wasn't following any official social media pages for Mcfarlane Toys around this point in time. I wasn't well in tune with the news with, what was coming out for this month or next month, however these things were released. I didn't know any of this information. I was still just relying on just scrolling through Amazon, which I don't think is a good thing. But it was because I kept searching on Amazon every couple weeks or so just to see what figures were popping up that I discovered that this Arkham Knight Batman went up for pre-order. And this was my first time pre-ordering an action figure, because I never done that before. And I had to get this figure for many reasons. I love the Batman Arkham trilogy games, right? All 3 of those games are amazing, including Arkham Origins, which I count as part of that whole Arkham series of games. But the game that I find myself replaying the most, out of all those other ones, is Arkham Knight. I've really loved the whole Batmobile sort of thing that you can do in that game, where you can drive around. There were a lot of missions that required you to use the Batmobile. And one of the things that I loved about the Arkham Knight game was the fact that it was just a very beautiful looking game. And just gliding around the city of Gotham with Batman was a fun experience in that game. So, being someone who never had any other versions of the Arkham Knight Batman in figure form prior to this line, I had to get a copy of this figure and add it to my collection. And so I did. And the funny thing about this figure is that for a period of time, this Batman figure was basically my primary Batman for my early iteration of what I would call my Justice League shelf. And maybe to some of you, it would be very weird because it's an Arkham Knight Batman. Why would you use this one when you can use a more classic looking Batman? Which eventually we did get, down the road. But you have to understand that when these are the only figures that you have in your collection, you kind of have to work with what you have. And right now, I'm still debating if he should stay as the primary one or if I should use the Nightfall Batman to, be the replacement. But the more I look at this figure again, and the more I remember about, the past and how this all started, I think he's going to stay the primary Batman for me. Okay? This is my shelf. This is my version of this Justice League team. And I think he's just going to stay on board as that Batman that represents, the main one for me. I just really love this figure. And I think Mcfarlane did a good job with this figure at the time that they released this one. Because, for a $20 figure, it's pretty well sculpted. It has good amount of details to it. Of course, it could probably be painted a little bit better in some places. And we'll talk more about that when we get into aesthetics. All right, as usual with these reviews, we got to start with that data profile card. And now, these data profile cards start to change. This was probably the first one to stop using that thicker material, so all the cards feel like this now, and I think it started with this figure. So, as you can see, there is this nice video game render image of the Arkham Knight Batman, and there he is in figure form. Of course, not exactly the same with some of the details, right? But, For an action figure, I think they nailed the look. So there's that. And on the back, you do have all these information. You know, the source, where it came from. Of course, it's from a video game. His real name is Bruce Wayne. He's 6'2". He weighs 210 pounds. And this text information down here, which, you know what? I'm just going to read it again. We already know Batman's origin, but let's just read it. As a child, Bruce Wayne watched as his parents were brutally killed in Gotham City's crime alley. Man, I hate when they do stuff like that. Okay, it's Gotham City's crime alley. Traumatized by their deaths, he devoted his life to becoming the world's greatest weapon against crime, the Batman. To become the ultimate vigilante, the Dark Knight disciplined his mind and body to reach the pinnacle of mental and physical superiority. He's a master detective and an expert martial artist, but his greatest weapon is his mind. Batman has a plan for every occasion, as well as high-tech weapons, gadgets, and vehicles to assist him in his relentless pursuit of justice. And that is quite fitting of a description because, you know, any one of you who has played the Arkham games, this Batman is well equipped with a lot of sorts of gadgets and stuff. And now we can talk about some accessories that he did include, which fall in line with those gadgets. And of course, you have this Batarang that he does come with. And I think this Batarang is supposed to be that retractive one. I don't know if that's the right word, but if you remember in the game how there are some missions where you have to throw a Batarang to hit something and then, you know, control it to hit another thing just to get a door open. I think this is what that Batarang is. It looks like that one. The remote control Batarang, I guess that's what I would call this. So he does have this as an accessory, which is pretty cool. And of course, one of the common tools that he uses in the Arkham games is his spray gel, the explosive one. So when he sprays it on the wall, presses a button, you know, the whole thing blows up. This is, of course, one of those gadgets that he frequently uses in the game. Pretty cool. It could be painted better. It is all black. I'm pretty sure there are some details on this that could be changed. So if you are a customizer, you could probably add some details to that if you have this figure. And of course, his last accessory that he comes with is the shock gun. Well, it's not a gun. I don't want to call this a gun because he doesn't... Well, actually, it looks like a gun. The best way to describe this thing is that, you know how there are some missions where the power generator thing is down and you're supposed to blast something at it so you can turn it back on? I don't remember what the name of this like tool is, but funny thing is that you can actually use this against the enemy mobs as well to stun them. So yeah, technically this is a electric shotgun of some sort. So pretty cool. And again, it's just all the same color. You know, there should be some details here as well. I don't think it's completely black. There's probably some silvers that could be added. But nevertheless, it's a very nicely sculpted representation of this weapon that he uses for, you know, or tool, whatever you want to call it. I'm pretty sure it's a weapon. So there is that. I hate the fact that I forgot the names of these items. I just, you know, I'm so bad at remembering names, but it is what it is. Okay, let's take a look at the figure now. All right, let's talk about the aesthetics here. And let's start with the design and sculpt of this figure. I love the details that they poured into his torso armor area. And this is one of the first figures, I think. I don't remember because it's been so long. But this figure did not have torso articulation on the upper part of his chest. There was no carve out cut here, you know, compared to most figures that they make where there is. And the reason for that, which I believe is the fact that all of this sculpt detail would have been ruined if there was a cut. You can see how seamless it almost looks, where it just feels like it should all be one entire piece. And that is why there is no cut here. Now, I wish there was a cut in between because it would give him better articulation for his upper, uh, torso movement, and of course down here. But I can understand why, from a creative standpoint, why they did not want to do that, because this entire armor piece just looks really cool. And if you ruin it with like a cut in between, it would make the entire thing look ugly. So that's why there is no upper torso movement for this figure. So everything is relied on in the waist area down here with this waist joint. So sacrificing articulation for sculpt, which isn't always a bad thing in my opinion. I sometimes think that, hey, if you want to make it better in sculpt and you got to sacrifice a little bit of articulation, that's okay. And in this case, that's what they did. So you can see like all those like details of his suit and some of these texture marks down here as well. And even the bat logo, right? It sticks out a little bit. And there are some lines here, some grid lines present. So that's pretty cool. And of course, you have his head sculpt, which honestly is not a bad looking head sculpt. It really does look like, what he looks like in the game. He has his pointy ears, which is pretty cool. And I've had this figure for quite a long time now, and these are the only Batman ears that I've seen on all my Batman figures that have never warped. Maybe the plastic material for these ears were different, I'm not sure, but they've always stayed pretty consistent compared to some of the other Batman figures we've gotten where the ears have warped in the packaging. And of course, you have some details here with the neck, right? You can see that that's more armor covering the interior and also protecting his neck. He does have like this back part right here that continues the armor as well. And up here where his shoulders are, you can see how these pieces are separated from the torso piece up here. So this doesn't hinder articulation. In fact, you can get his arm out pretty decently. And he does have a butterfly joint. Now, I feel like the butterfly joint for this figure, again, is just there to fill in the gaps. It's not there to work as an actual butterfly joint because, as I've said, if these joints were to move better, there should be more room carved out in the front to provide some movement there. So, yeah. Torso area is pretty nicely detailed. And then coming to the arms, you can see the armor bits on his arms right here, right? If you played the game, there are details here. And he does have his communications thing on, one side of these gauntlets. If you've played the game, you have seen him talking to Barbara and what was the Robin in the game? Oh wait, was Jason? No, it was not Jason. It was Tim. Tim. Oh, I'm getting the names mixed up. It was Tim Drake, because Jason is Red Hood by this point in time. So, yeah, he has his communications thing and all that stuff. So, man, how am I forgetting those details, man? I replayed this game probably more than any other game that I replay. Okay. So, yeah, you get these nice little details here, which is pretty cool. I like that they're sculpted really nicely. And then down in the hands, you have his gloves and stuff. And speaking of hands, that was a missed opportunity with this figure. I don't know why he didn't have fist hands that he can swap to, because, he doesn't always use his gadgets. It would have been nice if he had some fist hands, right? Most of the time when I have him on the shelf, he's always holding this thing. So, yeah, I don't know what happened there. And then when you come down to his legs, you have more details in the armor, right? As you can see right here. You have more texturing detail of his suit that he's wearing. The belt, is painted all gold color. But of course, some of these areas could have been painted better. But hey, it is a $20 figure, like I said. So, for $20, the sculpt detail is pretty freaking spot on. Because there are some figures that cost the same price that don't get this type of treatment when it comes to sculpt details. So, it is really gnarly to be looking back at this figure and seeing how nicely made it is, because some of our newer figures that we get these days don't even have this much type of detail to it anymore, because they're reusing body bucks more often than new sculpts. And that was what I liked about the first year of Mcfarlane, was the fact that he was very experimental. He was making new body bucks all the time, and that's something that I really miss. Yeah. And of course, let's talk about this cape. It is a very nice looking cape. You can see how tattered the material is. Like, it's making it look like, you know, he's in motion, of course, in some ways. Now, it is soft PVC, right? This is all sculpted. So, you know, on the under part of it, you do have more of the same patterns, but on the other side. And there is your information stuff down there that's hidden, which is pretty good. And I did look at the year number of the copyright date on this figure. It is 2020. So this is from year one. I was doubting myself for a bit because I was forgetting, did this come out in year one or year two? And it said 2020 on it. So I was like, oh, it is year one, because 2020 was when most of it started. So, man, it's a long time. And yeah, his boots are pretty much, or not boots, his shoes. Yeah, they're pretty much just like this. They're all black. They do have some sculpt details to them, but that's pretty much it when it comes to aesthetics for this figure. There really isn't a whole lot going on outside of these, details that do exist. But because they're all painted in the same color, they hide a lot of the details. And this is definitely one of those figures that I bet some people did do custom work too. Now, I haven't seen any photos of the custom versions of these Arkham Knight Batmans, but I'm pretty sure they exist. And yeah, definitely a cool figure to be looking back at. So that's the aesthetics. Now, let me zoom out and talk about the articulation. So even though he doesn't have torso articulation, he still has a good waist rotation down here. So I want to start with this. And it does lock in. Like, you can hear that click noise, right? And I don't think it's like a bad articulation with the waist, especially if you turn it. And I think he can lean back, right? Can he lean back? I kind of lean back a little bit. So, kind of works. It's not the best. Again, not having that upper, cut here for more movement that does limit what you can do with this figure in terms of action poses. But because this cape here also is kind of a problem, you're not really getting him into some crazy dynamic poses, right? Like, it feels like this figure is meant to stay in a neutral stance, which is what it looks like to me. But, at least the waist is still moving. You still get that turn, so if you want him to be looking in a different direction, it does work. So there you have that. His arms do spread out because these pieces don't get in the way. His arm can go all the way back because the cape doesn't really hinder the arm. He does have double articulation in his arms. He does have swivel in the hands. There is movement, and there is a swivel up here with the bicep. I keep saying that word wrong. I keep pronouncing it weird. And of course, with his head sculpt, some might think that he can't look up because of this piece on the back, but if you lean his head a little bit outward like this, he can look up. So, pretty cool that it can be situated to stay sitting, or he can look up that way if you lean the neck joint out. He can look down as well. So, head movement is not too bad. Now, in terms of turning his head, though, that's where it's not the greatest because the collar piece does get in the way. So, when you do turn his head, you kind of have to play with that neck joint a little bit to make it look natural. But he does have articulation in the head, so that's good. As for his legs, he can spread out that much, even with the belt piece, and that's still better than some figures can, which is very surprising for a figure like this. And can he kick up? Now, when it comes to kicking, yes, that's where the belt comes in. That's where it does hinder his leg from kicking out too much. But if you are okay with trying to get the leg up a little bit more and not leave it in this pose, of course, because it will warp the belt, that's as far as he's going to go. As for his articulation, he does have double articulation. And man, even for a 5-year-old figure, those joints are still tight. They are still stiff. Like it was a new figure that I got yesterday. It's crazy. His feet does articulate. There is swivel down here as well. And it does move. There is toe articulation. And that is basically all the standard articulation that most Mcfarlane DC Multiverse figures have. And his thigh swivels do work. So, you know, sometimes they don't work, but in this case, they do. So, pretty cool. And that is the articulation for the Arkham Knight Batman. And I freaking love this figure, even with these, you know, certain flaws that it has. Again, the articulation is not like the best on this figure. It has limitations, but, you know, it's still pretty good. And at least he doesn't have, you know, that quality control issue that the Amazing Yamaguchi one has with the shoulder armor. If you've seen videos of that quality control, that scares me. That figure costs like over 100 something. And no matter how good the articulation is, the fact that that quality control issue exists on all those figures of that particular Batman is not a good thing. So I'm very glad that for this shoulder armor thing, Mcfarlane did it this way, right? I don't know what Amazing Yamaguchi did for their version, but from everything I've seen of how easily it breaks, that does scare me a lot. So sometimes when you buy expensive figures, things can happen, you know? And things happen with even cheaper figures like this. But, you know, I'm satisfied with the ones I have at this price point, that I don't have to jump to those import ones. Okay, let's do a comparison to another Batman based off the Arkham game, because, you know, he didn't just make the Arkham Knight Batman. He did make an Arkham Asylum Batman and an Arkham City Batman, but of course the costumes for those two games, I believe, are the same costume, so there's no difference between the two figures. So this is the one from the Arkham City build wave that came with Solomon Grundy as the build figure. And as you can see, there is quite a difference in sculpt here. They are not the same body buck. They're sculpted differently, and even the head sculpts are completely different. And you can see how thick the armor for the Arkham Knight Batman is. It's quite different. So, having both these Batmans in my collection, I like the way that they came out. You know, they're not perfect, okay? They got flaws. They got problems. There's things that are not good about them. But you have to remember, for figures that are costing $20 to $25 in terms of a Batman figure, I still think these are good. And, you know, the aftermarket price for this guy I've seen recently is not a pretty number. It is not a pretty number. So I'm just very happy to have this figure. And I'm happy that that pure luck of mine happened that day, where I just saw it, you know, up for pre-order. And the rest is history. So, all right. And that is basically the comparison between these two figures. And that is basically going to be it for today's review of this Batman Arkham Knight figure. I said what I had to say about it. It is my second favorite Batman figure because, of course, my all-time favorite Batman figure is still going to be that White Knight Batman figure that was released. And with that said, if you found today's video enjoyable, give it a like. If you want to subscribe to the channel for more action figure content and whatever else I do on here, you can. You don't have to. In the end of the day, I make these videos for fun. And with that said, take care, and I will see you in the next video.